It's the 24th. March 2015, 10 a.m. and an Airbus A320 of Germanwings takes off from Barcelona's El Prat airport with 144 passengers and 6 crew members on a flight to Düsseldorf, Germany. Just 40 minutes later, the plane disappears from ground radar over the French Alps. What happened back then? We'll go through both the official version and, above all, the conspiracy theories. Theories explaining the circumstances of the crash, because some of them are really wild and bizarre. You might not have even heard of some of them yet. Welcome to the channel where everything is completely different. In the first video dealing with conspiracy theories, if you enjoy my content, I'd appreciate a subscription, a like, or a comment. The Airbus A320-11, which is an aircraft with the unique serial number 147 and the registration DAIPX, made its very first flight in the month of November in the year 1990. At the time of the disaster, it had already been in the air for 24 years, and over that nearly quarter of a century, it managed to log more than 58,000 flight hours across almost 740,000 flights. The cockpit crew consisted of 43-year-old German captain Patrick Sondenheimer, who had 10 years of experience and 6,000 flight hours with Germanwings, Lufthansa and Condor Airlines. The co-pilot was also German, 27-year-old Andreas Lubitz, who had logged 630 flight hours with Germanwings. After takeoff at 10:01, both pilots engaged in a routine conversation for 20 minutes and nothing indicated that anything was wrong. Then Captain Sondenheimer handed control over to co-pilot Lubitz and left for the restroom. At 10:27, Lubitz was left alone in the cockpit. At that time, the plane had reached a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet, which is about 11.5 kilometers, and at a speed of 800 kilometers per hour, it was heading over the Mediterranean Sea toward the French coast. 4 minutes later, Lubitz changed the autopilot setting to an altitude of 96 feet, which is about 30 meters above sea level and well below the terrain of the French Alps. Meanwhile, Sondenheimer was returning to the cockpit, but the cockpit was locked from the inside. The captain knocked and banged on the door. He spoke into the cabin using the intercom and tried to enter the numerical code on the keypad to unlock the door, but it was in vain. He tried everything he could to get into the cockpit, even attempted to break down the door, but he didn't succeed. Lubitz did not communicate with anyone, he just sat and waited. At 10:40, the aircraft disappears from radar, and the last thing heard on the cockpit voice recordings is Lubitz's calm breathing, Sondenheimer's pounding on the cockpit door, and in the background, the screams of passengers who, in the final seconds before the crash, realized that something was wrong. Just a few moments later, the Airbus crashes into the Trois-Veches Massif in the Provençal Alps at a speed of 700 km per hour. An investigation followed, which revealed that Lubitz had been declared unfit for work by doctors and that he had concealed a psychosomatic illness from his employer, Germanwings. In the days leading up to the fateful flight, he searched the internet for terms such as methods of suicide and cockpit doors and their security measures. The final report of the investigative commission states that the co-pilot Lubitz deliberately crashed the aircraft with suicidal intent. That is the official version regarding the investigation of the Germanwings Flight 9525 crash, but many people simply couldn't accept it and so they came up with their own theories. I've arranged them from the more reasonable ones to the truly bizarre. This still fairly normal conspiracy theory tells us that a technical malfunction was to blame for everything and Lubitz was just a scapegoat. Why? Whenever there are accidents caused by technical malfunctions, lengthy investigations are carried out, and it's not uncommon for aircraft to be grounded, which of course results in a significant financial burden for the airlines. By placing the blame on the pilot, airlines also try to cover up their own mistakes in aircraft maintenance, for which they could face significant financial penalties. Simply put, airlines cannot afford to make mistakes, so using the co-pilot as a scapegoat is the most elegant solution. What other theory could have emerged during the peak of the migration crisis than the theory of a terrorist attack? This theory claims that Lubitz was an Islamic convert and acted, for example, on behalf of the Islamic State. He was said to have often spent time at a mosque in Bremen, which was reportedly at the center of the investigation into this tragedy. There, as a sleeper cell, he received the order to carry out a terrorist attack, and since he was a pilot, the plan was set. However, what speaks against this theory is the fact that investigators never found any evidence that this act was politically or even religiously motivated, let alone that Lubitz was a Muslim religious fanatic. Alleged witnesses of the Airbus crash claim that they saw 3 French military aircraft, Mirage Rafale. They reportedly flew over the area at the same time the crash occurred. They also heard a loud bang, probably explosions from launched missiles. They said it was strange that the fighter jets flew over the region 3 times and that there were so many of them, since locals are used to seeing only 1 per day here. Why? Well, that wasn't explained in the theory. Maybe someone wanted to create a rift between France and Germany? And who would want that? Who would benefit from it? This theory gives us more questions than answers. Here we learn that there is some kind of informant who knows exactly what happened. Supposedly everything was prepared in advance as the Swiss Secret Service knew about the whole operation. A certain very wealthy man from South America was interested in investing a large amount of cash, which he couldn't transfer through the bank to somewhere in East Asia. It was a sum of several $billion, with 3 owners of this money from South America and 1 French businessman meeting in Barcelona, where they wanted to load a container with this money onto a plane to Düsseldorf and from there get the money to Zurich. And that's exactly what happened, except only the 3 South American men flew with the container, while the Frenchman changed his plan and flew directly to Zurich. However, the plane crashed and so the deal could not be completed. 14 days after the Germanwings disaster, this French businessman was found by members of the French Secret Service, who asked him why he had suddenly changed his plan and flown directly to Zurich. It was clear to him that the operation had been secured from the other side in such a way that the deal would never go through. In connection with this conspiracy theory, I should also mention that the plane was blown up, and supposedly, the day after the accident, Lubitz's body was found in a suitcase in a parked car at the Barcelona airport. Don't ask me, I don't really understand it myself, but I'd love to read your comments. Another theory talks about the plane being shot down during a failed test of the so-called high-energy liquid laser defense system, known in English by the acronym HELAC. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that this US Air Force system attempted to shoot down an intercontinental ballistic missile, but instead destroyed a civilian airliner with 150 people on board. According to this report, extensive atmospheric electrical anomalies were detected over southern France, western Italy and southwestern Switzerland, which coincidentally are also the combat operational area of the 510th. Combat squadrons of US Armed Forces fighter jets operating from the Aviano base in Italy. The report further states that it is peculiar that these anomalies occurred at the same time as the outage of British civilian radar systems. This is said to be caused by the takeoff or landing of B-1 aircraft, which are capable of carrying the HELAC system. Experts from the Russian Ministry of Defense then claim that it is extremely difficult to target lasers at long-range targets, and their effect tends to spread through the atmosphere and hit everything in their path. And if a civilian passenger plane happens to get in the way of the laser, tragedy and conspiracy theories are born. According to this theory, Germanwings Flight 9525 crashed because of the giant CERN particle accelerator. It was located just 200 kilometers from the crashed plane, and as luck would have it, on that very day it was shut down due to a malfunction in one of its magnetic devices. Coincidence? I don't think so. There is speculation about some kind of magnetic anomaly that could have possibly disabled the Airbus's flight instruments. It should be noted that CERN has long been in the sights of conspiracy theory enthusiasts. People are afraid that scientists there are creating black holes which could one day get out of control and swallow our planet. Every little boy wanted to have a remote-controlled airplane. If you ever join the US military, you'll have that opportunity in full life size. This theory claims that the control of the airplane was taken over remotely, just like a year earlier with flight MH370 or with the planes from 9/11, September. It is said that the Germanwings flight was accompanied by 2 unidentified aircraft, and when it crashed into the mountain, these aircraft flew off to an unknown destination. Why would someone want to take control of the aircraft remotely? Well, the explanation from some conspiracy theorists is simple. Among the passengers on board, there was supposedly one person who was important, who had certain crucial information, and this information could have been revealed and could have harmed certain elites and nations, such as America. This person was then the real target, and it's clear that they were fine. There was suspicion that this classified information would be leaked, which would then mean major trouble for America, its plans, and its covert operations. That's why it was necessary to destroy them. At the same time, it was also a message to the then German Chancellor Angela Merkel. At that time, Germany was reportedly considering leaving the Western nations and was looking longingly eastward toward Russia with tendencies to join BRICS. So this was a warning to the leaders of Germany and France that this was not acceptable, and that they must remain under the control of American and British power. How does remote control technology work? As already mentioned, 2 unknown aircraft were flying alongside the transport plane, and on board they carried technology for mind control. The technology controlled the pilot's mind, neutralized him, and suppressed his ability to think clearly. In fact, it turned him into a drone who became fixated on destroying the plane, and with it, the person on board who was a problem and a danger to them. He was controlled and kept in check. His thinking as a normal human being was shut down, and he didn't believe he was doing anything wrong. He was in a hypnotized state, a kind of trance, under the illusion that he was piloting correctly. The instructions were coming to him from the plane that was flying in tandem next to the Airbus. Thus, Lubeck was oblivious to Captain Sondenheimer, who was pounding on the door. He simply piloted the plane as he had been taught, unaware of reality. Those 2 unknown craft were, of course, flying saucers, which dampened the communication field and prevented the security codes on the cockpit door from working properly. As you can see for yourselves, human creativity knows no bounds, and that's especially true when it comes to conspiracy theories. I sincerely hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please share, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You know how it goes. See you next time in another video, and don't forget that everything is completely different.